Hello, Terry Caliendo here again from Dedicated Managers, and welcome to another edition of Can He Talk for That Long? And yes, I can. I could probably go for 20, 30 minutes easily. So let's talk about what's happening here. Last I talked, I believe I was down here somewhere in describing things, and I have since been on a coding rampage. And I am not going to have time to really go over all of this stuff right now. Maybe someday come back if I get comments or something that you'd like to see what's going on here. But I think what I'm going to do is just show where I'm at now and kind of work backwards and show how the code works. So let's go ahead and fire up the app here. So I've styled the app a little bit, probably since I last have shown it. And I now have also nested entities working. So say we have this is my list, my primary list of main clients. I can add a new client, or I can go and view the clients that have already been created. So if I go and view myself, so I would be the caregiver, and I can have a bunch of information about me, and I can go and change all this information, make it longer or shorter. And then these are nested entities where the kinship children here are attached to this primary caregiver, and they can increase in amount. So I can add another child. I can add a child, David Caliendo, and I can give him these. This is also another nested. I'll come back to that in a second, actually. So if I go back to Terry, now you can see I've got two children for one primary caregiver, which makes sense, right? So I want to have a growing list here of all the children that this person is caring for. And then I also want to know, this company also needs to know who else is in the household. So we can add others, and we can say, you know, Bob, Sally, I don't know. And that person will then show up in the others in the household. I can add another person. Mickey, sure, Mick, and that person will show up here. So, and then they also need to track the total income for everybody and where those incomes come from, because certain benefits come from, you know, based on things. So we can go ahead and attach to each person. I can then attach an income stream. So this might be a part-time job of, say, 500, and there's no, it should say per month or something. I have, you know, that's just interface stuff. I haven't decided what I'm going to do there. And then maybe they have a full-time job of maybe, you know, 2,000 per month. So that would be this person's total income. So then I'll just do, at some point I can sum the incomes and show that what their total income is, that kind of thing. And then we can also, you know, create something here that will show the sum of incomes for all the different entities. So I can, you know, Anthony the child has child support and death benefits maybe that come in as incomes. So those are, you know, again, nested entities that can add forever and be put onto this child of this parent of its child. So this child is attached to its parent, and then this kinship child is attached to this parent entity. So it gets confusing when I say child between the entities and what we're tracking here. But the way it works is we've got the primary caregivers entity. So actually, maybe I'll show the database right now. So when we go into the database, we can see here's the primary kinship caregiver. So this is going to be the list of all my clients, or the company's clients. So there's Bob, and there's me. So if I take a look here, here's Bob and here's me. So that's this field. And if we go into a client, we're now in the primary kinship caregiver is this person. So I'm looking at that person, and then here's his sub-entities. So kinship children is the kinship child entity, and we should see Anthony Caliendo and David Caliendo. So there's Anthony Caliendo, and there's the other for the different parent entity. Here's David. So here's Anthony, here's David, and they are referenced back to the parent collection by the parent ID and the parent type. So this kinship child relates back to the parent type kinship caregiver, which is me, Terry, by this ID. So if we go back and look at primary kinship caregiver, we should find the ID 9. I think that's a 1. Looks like a pipe symbol, but 919. That should be me, Terry. So here's the 919, and then there's me, Terry. So kinship children is a child of primary kinship caregiver Terry of ID 919. So now if I dive into the child, so if I dive into Anthony, now I am looking at the the kinship child of ID ZH blah blah blah. So that's this child's ID. He is connected to primary kinship caregiver 919, which is me, which is Terry Caliendo. And he has incomes, and there will be other things too, like custody status, which will change over time. So there will be a list of those, which will just be basically the same as this, but another nested entity. And so if I dive into the income, you can see that income is, here's the income. This is the ID of this particular income. It's attached to the kinship child, which is Anthony. So if I hover over and you look down here, his ID is ZH, the ZH that was right there. And then he's attached to primary caregiver 919, which is me. So you can see that it kind of cascades back, and each thing is added to a parent, but it can grow in nested fashion. The reason not to keep this a flat database, if I was to keep everything in one flat database, I would have to have maybe 5 slots for kids, and then I could just fill them in as I go, but they can't grow. You need another entity or a way to grow that amount of children, to grow or shrink it and have that be variable. Otherwise you have to have it set in the database. And what if somebody has 10 children, which actually, believe it or not, does happen. So then you'd have to always accommodate the maximum. So I'd have to have, in this flat database here, I'd have to have spots for 10 children and all their different incomes and all that stuff. So separating it out lets me do that in a growing fashion where they become their own entities, and then I just attach them to a parent. So that's what's going on here. You can see that this is flat here because of the way I tie things back to each other. I describe, within any entity, I can describe who its parent is and what its parent type is. So that way I can keep this flat. And the reason I keep this flat is because Firebase doesn't have very good search capabilities of across child collections. So I could have primary kinship relative, I could have this one, the main one, and I could add a collection below it so that collection, let's give it a collection name of, instead of, we know that a child is a nested entity in my system. Here a child is a nested entity of the primary caregiver. So I could have made, instead of having this flat here, I could have made kinship child underneath primary kinship caregiver. So I could make a nested entity below that, and then this would be first name, add a field, last name. So if I save that, you can see it now cascades to the right, and I actually have not dealt with going this far in this interface. So you can see we've got kinship children here, and then that is the new kinship child underneath. So my program would create this. I guess looking up here is helpful. You can see that the kinship children is now a child in the database. Kinship children is now a child of primary kinship caregiver. So I could have done it that way, where I stored the children underneath the master collection. It goes collection, document. So I could have made the kinship children collection, and that would have been a growing list, because I could add another document and have first name, last name, and this is what my my interface would create. That would be what I just did there. Is I emulated this interface where I gave them a first name and a last name. So these two children are now underneath this primary kinship caregiver. So when I search this deep, I only find these two kids. So they're all in alignment. If I go back to primary kinship caregiver and I add to the other person, so Bob, I can add a collection to him. Let's see. Did I add that on Bob before? Maybe I added that on Bob before. Yeah, I added it on Bob before. So now with Terry doesn't have that collection, but programmatically I could add that collection. So kinship children. Right, first name. And so now we can see that I'm underneath the 919, which was me, Terry. I'm only seeing the kinship children for the 919. I'm not seeing the kinship children for the other entity. So if I go back to the 7X one and I look at his, I only see his two children. I don't see the third one that I created, which was, if I go back, 919, kinship children, the ST one. So the other two are gone. So basically, you're building in a linear fashion downward, and that actually makes working with the entities easier, because you don't have to then store, you don't have to store the knowledge of the parent. I have to store the way I'm doing things. I have to store, where is it? I'm sorry, I'm circling the wrong thing. The parent type and the collection ID and the parent type. I guess I was circling the right thing. So that's how I'm tying this guy back to this to its caregiver. Primary kinship caregiver is by its parent type. So all of my three entities are showing up in here. So this child is tied to the 7X one, and this child is tied to the 9-1. So these are the two children that are tied back to me, Terry, and then this is the child that's tied back to Bob. So they're all showing up, and therefore, since they're all in this collection, I have to somehow differentiate and say, who's your parent? Which parent do you belong to? And that's what's done here. But the reason I do that is so that later when I go to search, you cannot search cross collection. So if I wanted to find all, if I wanted a sum of all the children's incomes, I wouldn't be able to do that with this nested way. With Google's inherent nested way, you can't search cross collections. So I can't find all of if there was a field here, income. If there was a field here, I wouldn't be able to, I could find all the incomes within here, I think, but I can't find the incomes for the other primary caregivers and add them all together. So that's why I need it flat, is to do it all, so I can just go into this kinship child, and now I can pull all these entities and get their incomes without having to pull every single thing above it. So it's just a little way to save on queries, I guess, and not have to download the entire database to be able to search across these nested collections. So that about wraps that up. As you can see, the interface is coming together. Now the way this looks nicer is this stuff is Vuetify, which makes it look nice. This is not using Vuetify, which is why it doesn't look good yet. I need to go and use their component for breadcrumbs. Haven't done that yet. But all this highlighting and you know, the coloring and the bolding and most of that stuff is just, it's all done by Vuetify, and the buttons, and when I click on a button, how it radiates out, again, that's all Vuetify. So that's a brief overview of where I'm at now. I might do another video after this and delve into code a little bit and try and walk through exactly how the code works. But as you can see, I've built it in a way that it's easy for me to add nested entities so that I can keep adding these other things that add on to their parent. And then within each entity, so that created a blank one. That's something I have to work on, figure out what to do with that. But within Terry, you know, Terry's got this is a nested entity within this entity, and then this is a nested entity within the child. And I could even go a step further if, you know, if I needed to, if there was something else. You know, if for some reason the child had a child who had incomes, you know, I could keep nesting downward the way I've built the database without doing a lot of super significant extra coding. So I'll talk about that in another video. Anyway, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers. Hope you enjoyed that or understand what's going on. Feel free to leave some comments. Shoot me an email through my website, dedicatedmanagers.com, and let me know if you actually use this or if you want to learn more. Whatever. Take care. Have a great day, and happy coding.